Welcome back. Well, Jonas Smith, I have to tell you, I've never met him, but he seems like a really good guy. Seems like a great Yukoner. Seems like he's involved in public life. And I have to tell you, I was impressed with the way he talked about civil liberties. You just don't hear that language, that vocabulary anymore. And maybe there's other things I don't know about him. I'm sure there are. But for a guy to talk about how we have to not divide ourselves and protect minorities, not just racial or religious minorities, but medical minorities or conscientious objectors. I'm going to say I found his comments almost touching. And for him to be sacked, to be defenestrated, to use the fancy word, thrown out of a window with no notice, warning, appeal, or explanation other than you had wrongthink, I think that bodes poorly for the Conservative Party. Joining me now to talk about this is one of our favorite guys, Andrew Lawton with True North. Andrew, welcome to the show. I have in front of me your new article, Conservatives bar former MP and leadership candidate Pierre Lemieux from running. So it's not just Jonas Smith, it's Pierre Lemieux, and there's other candidates too. First of all, welcome. Second of all, tell me what you think's going on.
Well, it's concerning. And, the Pierre Lemieux one is interesting. Here's a guy who took a riding that hadn't been conservative since the 1950s, Glengarry Prescott Russell in Ontario in 2006. And then he increased his margin in 2008 and 2011. And like a lot of conservative MPs, lost in 2015, tried to reclaim it in 2019, wasn't successful, wanted to run again this time around. And the party said, no, our rules say that if you lose twice in a row, you can't run a third time. Okay, rules are rules. Except the rules also let a candidate get a waiver from that, which has been given in other cases, such as with Kostas Menegakis in Richmond Hill. So the party very specifically did not allow a three-time MP to run. You may say, well, what's the deal? He's a social conservative. And given what's happened with Derek Sloan, what we've seen happen with other social conservative nomination candidates, even without evidence, it's fair to ask the question of does him fitting into that ideological section of the party have a role in him not being allowed to run? And I've had a lot of backlash, and I know you get this as well, Ezra, from people that say, well, defeating Trudeau has to be the first priority. We can't write these stories that start looking like conservative infighting. If you don't like the dirty laundry being aired, stop dirtying the laundry is my take on this.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is what's frustrating about Aaron O'Toole is if he disagrees with someone or if he regards them as a leadership rival or as someone stealing more sunshine than him, he deals with them not by reforming them or finding a special mission for them or even giving them busy work. He just silences them or tries to kick them out. He had Jim Karahalios, another leadership candidate, kicked out for saying mean things about him in the leadership. Well, if you can't handle that, you're probably not going to do well against the liberal war machine. And even Pierre Poilievre, I think it's widely acknowledged he was demoted from finance critic because he was shining too brightly and he made Aaron O'Toole look dull by comparison. I mean, this Pierre Lemieux, I don't know him, but if he could take a riding that for 60 years has been liberal and he won it a few times and they're finding this excuse not to run again, I don't know. I just don't know how many people you can purge and still call yourself a big tent. I mean, O'Toole says he's for a big tent, but anyone who thinks a bit different than him or anyone who's a little more conservative than him gets thrown out of that tent pretty quick.
Yeah, and again, I mean, there's a disorganization aspect here too. In the case of Pierre Lemieux, he filed his papers in January, and just on August 6th, last week, was told no. So you got to wonder, why are they stringing him along? We see this happening in Ontario politics as well. Stella Ambler, a former federal Conservative MP, was approved as a nomination candidate, and then the Ontario PCs decided to scrap the nomination and appoint someone anyway. So there are a lot of very legitimate questions here as to what the end game in all of this is. If you don't want to have open nominations and you want to have hand-picked candidates that are going to hew to the leaders' positions, that's fine. Just own it. Just own it and say, this is who we are. That's what Justin Trudeau has done, and for the most part, it's worked for him. He doesn't even bother promising open Democratic nominations. He just says, these are the people we want. This is what they have to think, and the media gives him a pass on it. The Conservatives, it seems like, are trying to have the best of both worlds here. They're trying to say, yes, we're an open big tent party, but then if the wrong person wins, they have to quickly pivot and adjust that.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, in a lot of these cases, I don't think that these guys being thrown out are the wrong person. I mean, maybe I'm a little enamored with this Jonas Smith in the Yukon, but boy, a guy talking that thoughtfully about civil liberties doesn't seem like the wrong guy to me. I don't know. I'm disappointed by that. I have a theory, and it's that Erin O'Toole doesn't really hate these guys. He's served with some of them in Parliament before. Some of them have been even in cabinet with him before, under Stephen Harper. He doesn't hate them. He's not even ideologically appalled by them. I think Erin O'Toole is just so terrified about what the mean girls think. And by that, I'm joking. I'm referring to the CBC and the Globe and Mail and the Toronto Star and their Ottawa press gallery that has such a clique, so much peer pressure to think a certain way. I think that, throwing out Jonas Smith, oh my God, we have to get rid of him because the CBC loves vaccine passports so much. Or, oh my God, we got to get rid of Pierre Lemieux because he's too socially conservative for the Toronto Star. I don't even think that it's Erin O'Toole's own views. I think he's trying to guess what the media party wants him to say and preempt them because he just doesn't want them to be mean to him, which they're going to be anyways.
No, I would agree with that. And even the fourth wave alarmism we've been seeing from the Conservatives in the last week of, it's so dangerous to have an election in the Delta-driven fourth wave, or maybe it was American Airlines, Delta, I can't remember, but I get my variants mixed up. But if they're doing that, I don't think they're true believers in that. I think that they see that as being the cudgel they can use against Justin Trudeau. But it's the same here. I don't think that they actually have an issue with these people. I've talked to a lot of people on Erin O'Toole's campaign. I know they're solid Conservatives, but Conservatives tend to, that with a capital C, the Conservative Party tends to default into fear and panic. We saw this with Andrew Scheer's campaign in 2019, where Andrew Scheer, who's been, a former reformer from out in the prairies, he's on side on a lot of these issues, but once he's in that position, it immediately goes into what's the safest, blandest, most banal thing we can say. And that tends to be dogma for Conservative campaigns.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.